You're not tired of everything, you're tired of being owned by it. Detachment isn't healing, it's execution. Keep feeling and you'll stay controllable. You keep calling it tired. That word is a narcotic. It softens the truth so you can keep living the same weak pattern without changing anything. You're not burnt out. You're over-available, over-reachable, over-permissioned. You've been turned into a public utility. Everyone plugs into you, and you act surprised you feel drained. Exhaustion isn't a medical mystery. It's a hierarchy report. Look at your life like a strategist, not a victim, who has access to you, who can interrupt you, who can demand your attention and still keep your respect, who can make you feel guilty for protecting your time. That's not stress. That's ownership. Machiavelli understood a simple law. Power doesn't always come from force. It comes from access. Who gets your ear, your time, your emotion? The man who controls access controls the frame. The man who loses access becomes a tool inside someone else's frame. Your fatigue is the cost of being too accessible. You answer too quickly. You explain too much. You stay present when you should be absent. You keep old loyalties alive like dead soldiers you refuse to bury. And then you wonder why everything feels heavy. Because everything is heavy when you're carrying other people's expectations like they're your mission. Here's the lens shift. Your attention is a throne. Every time you give attention to something, you crown it, you elevate it, you feed it life. So when you say you're tired of everything, what you're really saying is, I've crowned too many things that don't deserve a throne. You crowned people who don't respect you, conversations that go nowhere, obligations that were never negotiated, drama that isn't yours, opinions that don't pay you, emergencies that appear whenever someone wants control. And the more you crown them, the more they expect it. Entitlement grows like mold in warm rooms. Your availability is the warmth. This is why rest doesn't fix it. Sleep doesn't fix it. Vacation doesn't fix it. You return to the same ecosystem where everything has learned it can feed on you. You don't need comfort. You need detachment, not as healing, but as execution. Detachment is the act of removing your nervous system from other people's hands. Most men refuse detachment because they confuse it with cruelty. That's the moral trap. They've been conditioned to believe being good means being endlessly reachable, endlessly forgiving, endlessly understandable. That conditioning creates the perfect prey. A man who can be drained and still apologizes for not having more to give. Detach, like Machiavelli, means you stop treating access as charity and start treating it as currency. Currency has rules. It's limited. It's guarded. It's exchanged for value. It's withdrawn when disrespected. Right now, your currency is leaking everywhere, tiny expenses that feel harmless but add up into collapse. One more reply, one more favor, one more argument, one more it's fine. One more late-night spiral, one more obligation you didn't choose. That's how men get exhausted, not from one big war, but from 1,000 small surrenders. So this chapter does one psychological thing to you. It removes the romance from your suffering. You stop saying, I'm tired. You start saying, my attention has been occupied. Occupied is a military word. It means foreign forces are living on your land. It means sovereignty has been violated. It means the next move is not rest. The next move is reclaiming territory. Because once you see exhaustion as enslavement, you can no longer tolerate the behaviors that created it. Instant availability, guilt-based compliance, emotional babysitting, loyalty to people who drain you, keeping peace by shrinking. That version of you dies later in the video. But first, you need the correct frame. You are not depressed, you are overexposed. And overexposure is not cured with comfort, it's cured with control. Detachment isn't a mood, it's a policy. And policies don't care how people feel about them. Your exhaustion isn't random, it's engineered. Not by some grand conspiracy, by a simple market law. What you keep supplying gets demanded. And you've been supplying emotional fuel like you own an oil field. Machiavelli would call it what it is, a supply chain problem. You are the resource. Your attention is the shipment. Your responsiveness is the delivery schedule. And predators, people, systems, even friends, don't attack your strength first. They attack your availability because availability is easier to harvest than competence. Here's the mechanism that drains you. You don't collapse from one big crisis. You collapse from 1,000 small requests you never priced. Quick question. Can you look at this? Just need a second. Are you free? Call me when you can. Each one seems harmless. That's why it works. Micro-obligations are designed to bypass your standards by being too small to justify resistance. You tell yourself, it's nothing. Then, nothing happens 50 times a day, and suddenly your mind is a war zone. This is how your time gets conquered, not with invasion, with settlements. A guilt hook is when someone attaches a moral label to your compliance. If you respond, you're good. If you don't, you're cold. If you set a boundary, you're selfish. If you detach, you're immature. That's not morality. That's leverage. Guilt is a currency system built for men who still want to be seen as honorable more than they want to be sovereign. The moment guilt controls your behavior, someone else owns your schedule. And the most dangerous part, you start guilt hooking yourself. You don't even need an enemy anymore. Your own mind enforces the leash. Emotional labor is invisible work, absorbing complaints, calming chaos, reassuring insecurities, carrying other people's moods. The world loves men who can regulate others. The world also punishes them by making them responsible for everything. So you become the strong one, the stable one, the reasonable one. Translation, the convenient container. And containers don't get thanked. They get filled until they crack. Responsiveness feels like competence. It's actually surrender. The always-on man doesn't live, he reacts. He doesn't choose his day chooses him. The phone pings, you move. The message arrives, you answer. The tension appears, you manage it. That's not leadership. That's servitude. In war terms, if your troops scramble at every distant gunshot, you lose the city without the enemy ever marching in. This is the mechanism that makes you stay even when you hate it. Sometimes they appreciate you, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they need you, sometimes they ignore you, sometimes they reward you, sometimes they punish you. That unpredictability hijacks you. It turns your attention into a slot machine. You keep pulling the lever, hoping the next interaction pays out. This is why you feel tired of everything. You're not just drained, you're hooked. The final stage is when the supply chain becomes your identity. I'm the guy who helps. I'm the guy who's always there. I'm the guy who keeps the peace. That identity sounds noble. It's actually a contract, signed without reading the terms. Once you believe that story, you'll keep supplying even when it kills you, because stopping would feel like self-betrayal. That's how emotional drain becomes permanent, not through force, through self-definition. So here's what this video does to your psychology. It turns your fatigue into evidence. You stop treating exhaustion like a mood and start treating it like an intelligence report, where you're being harvested, how you're being conditioned, and what systems are profiting from your availability. You don't need more rest. You need to interrupt the supply chain. You're not tired of everything. You're tired of everyone who discovered you're easy to access. Because once a man becomes reliably available, predators don't ask permission. They move in. They treat his attention like public property. Your exhaustion is the residue of contact with the wrong archetypes. Machiavelli didn't waste time hating people. He classified them. Classification is how you stop bleeding. Here are the main archetypes feeding on your availability. Learn them like enemy uniforms. The parasite doesn't respect you. They depend on you. They appear whenever they need something: help, money, advice, emotional regulation, rescue. They keep you in a permanent state of just this once. They drain you with constant requests disguised as closeness, entitlement, masked as vulnerability, selective gratitude that keeps you supplying when you slow down or detach. They flip fast. Guilt, anger, accusations. Parasites panic when the host stops feeding them. They never build their own strength. They build their comfort on yours. This is the most common one because it's socially accepted. The guilt merchant doesn't demand directly. They shame you into compliance. They weaponize moral language. You've changed. You're selfish. You think you're better than us. So you can't even reply. They drain you by making you defend your right to exist in peace. And every defense is a donation of attention. They punish you for saying no more than they appreciate you for saying yes. Some people don't want solutions. They want turbulence. Chaos addicts drag you into drama cycles, conflicts, scandals, emergencies, emotional storms. They keep the air thick so you can't think clearly, only react. They drain you with constant crises that magically require your presence, emotional volatility that forces you to stabilize them, confusion as a control method, detachment terrifies them because your calm exposes their addiction. They'll provoke you just to restart the fire. Tell, when things finally get peaceful, they create a new problem. This one uses you as an accessory. They like being seen near you, benefiting from your competence, your network, your stability. They drain you subtly. They borrow your credibility, then act like you're lucky to be included. When you detach, they don't chase emotionally, go political. They'll replace you publicly, downplay you, smear you lightly to protect their image. Tell, they respect the room more than they respect you. Not evil, still dangerous. This archetype latches onto your consistency. You become their emotional pacemaker. If you're not constantly available, they spiral, and they make their spiral your responsibility. They drain you with constant reassurance checks pressure for immediate replies, emotional consequences for your absence. You detach, and they call it cruelty, because dependency interprets boundaries as abandonment. Tell, your peace makes them insecure. This is the snake in the grass. They don't ask for much directly. They drain you through interruptions, subtle disrespect, time theft, and passive obstruction. Their goal is not your help, it's your depletion. They want you distracted, tired, reactive, because a tired man is easier to outperform, undermine, or mock. Tell, they celebrate your exhaustion as humor and resent your clarity. Most men don't get drained because they're surrounded by monsters. They get drained because they never priced access. They let parasites eat. They let guilt merchants shame. They let chaos addicts ignite. They let climbers borrow. They let dependents attach. They let rivals interrupt. And then they call it life. No, it's mismanaged territory. This chapter does one psychological thing. It removes the everything fog and gives you targets. Once you can name the archetype, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding strategically. Because each archetype has the same weakness. They collapse when access becomes conditional. And that's the next phase. How to detach without becoming a hollow ghost, and how to detach without giving them ammunition. The world doesn't drain you by accident. It drains you because it can. Modern life is built like an extraction empire. Notifications, obligations, social games, emotional negotiations. Everything designed to keep you reachable, responsive, and slightly guilty when you aren't. And the accessible man, he's the perfect resource. He thinks accessibility is virtue. He thinks endurance is masculinity. He thinks being there earns respect. Wrong. Accessibility earns entitlement. Entitlement is the seed of contempt. Once people feel entitled to you, they stop treating you like a man and start treating you like a function. Reply giver, fixer, validator, ear, wallet, buffer. This is why your exhaustion feels existential. It isn't just fatigue. It's the slow realization that your life has been occupied by other people's agendas. Here's the threat most men underestimate. When you detach, you don't just lose comfort. You trigger retaliation, not always loud retaliation. Modern retaliation is reputational and emotional. He's changed. He thinks he's too good. He's cold now. He's selfish. He's unstable. These are not observations, they're control attempts. The group punishes sovereignty because sovereignty makes everyone else look weak for tolerating their own chains. Machiavelli would recognize this instantly. The crowd loves a generous ruler until he stops handing out free bread. Then they call him cruel, because people don't hate your absence. They hate what your absence implies, that they were never entitled, that they were living on borrowed access, that you can leave without begging. And that implication is a threat to their position. Human beings run on a simple ranking system. What is scarce is valuable. What is always available is cheap. What is cheap is disrespected. So when you are always present, you become predictable. Predictable things get used. Used things get worn out. Worn out things get replaced. That is the life cycle of the accessible man. He becomes nice, then reliable, then useful, then invisible. then annoying when he finally asks for anything back. And the moment he protests, the group frames him as the problem because he broke the unspoken contract. You exist to serve. At work, the accessible man becomes the emergency response team for everyone else's incompetence. He answers after hours. He fixes mistakes. He says yes because he fears being seen as difficult. And what happens? He doesn't get crowned. He gets assigned more work, assigned less respect, assigned the role of the guy who will handle it. In relationships, the accessible man becomes the emotional shock absorber. He listens to storms. He absorbs moods. He apologizes first. He stays calm while being provoked. And what happens? His calm becomes expected. His patience becomes permission. His forgiveness becomes a renewable resource people stop valuing. In friendships, he becomes the always available audience, the one who shows up, the one who replies, the one who keeps the group together. And what happens? The group bonds around him until they start treating him like furniture. Present, useful, ignored. That's the punishment. You become a utility, not a person. Because once you've been used across enough arenas, your nervous system stops distinguishing between life and invasion. Everything feels like demand. Everything feels like noise. Everything feels like someone taking. That's why men say they're tired of everything. It's not everything. It's the fact that they never built a gate. A city without gates doesn't need enemies. It just gets looted by whoever wanders in. The final level of danger isn't fatigue, it's predictability. When everyone knows you'll respond, they can time you. When everyone knows you'll explain, they can bait you. When everyone knows you'll stay, they can disrespect you. Your availability becomes a steering wheel on your life, and other people hold it. That is the Machiavellian warning. The man who cannot detach cannot rule himself, and the man who cannot rule himself will always be ruled. Modern life doesn't reward your accessibility with loyalty. It rewards it with extraction. If you don't detach, you don't just stay tired. You stay owned. Detachment isn't self-care. That language is for men who still want to be liked while they retreat. Detachment is a tactical withdrawal, the kind commanders use when a battlefield is rigged, supply lines are compromised, and staying to prove something only serves the enemy. Your problem is not emotion, your problem is access. So the Machiavellian solution isn't to talk about feelings. It's to redesign your exposure like a fortress. Gates, guards, taxes, and punishments for trespass. Here's the protocol. The first move is not confrontation. It's silence, not sulking, not passive aggression. Silence as policy. You remove your reaction from their control. Because every person draining you is counting on one thing, your predictability. They poke, you answer. They complain, you soothe. They panic, you stabilize. Silence breaks their rhythm. Rhythm is how they harvest you. If you must respond, you respond like a clerk stamping forms. Not available. Can't. No. Handled. No explanations. Explanations are emotional intimacy with your predator. Instant response is submission disguised as efficiency. So you install delay, not to play games, but to break entitlement. Delay forces people to adapt to your schedule instead of training you to serve theirs. The moment you delay, you will see who was using you. Respectful people adjust. Predators escalate. Escalation is proof the access mattered more than you did. Right now, people reach you because they feel like it. That ends. Your attention becomes gated territory. Every interaction must pass a test. Is this important? Is this profitable? Is this aligned? Is this respectful? If it fails, it doesn't enter your mind. You don't owe everyone entry into your mental space. That belief is what made you tired. Most men leak energy because they let everything become a full emotional event. A message becomes a debate. A comment becomes a wound. A request becomes an obligation. You shrink your surface area by making your responses smaller, colder, and fewer. No paragraphs. No defending your choices. No explaining your intentions. When you stop performing clarity, you stop donating energy. Detachment isn't evenly applied. That's moral equality nonsense. Strategy is not fair. You cut the largest leaks first. The person who turns every conversation into drama, the guilt merchant who punishes your no, the parasite who only appears when they need fuel, the environment that demands constant availability. You don't manage these things. You reduce exposure or exit. Survival isn't polite. A boundary that isn't enforced is a suggestion, and suggestions get ignored. So you attach consequences, clean and immediate. If they guilt you, you end the conversation. If they disrespect you, you leave. If they repeat a violation, you reduce access permanently. Not revenge, calibration. Predators don't learn through discussion, they learn through loss. This is where most men fail. They detach for a day, then return over-explaining, over-giving, and over-apologizing. That teaches everyone. His detachment was emotional. Apply pressure and he collapses. So if you re-enter different. Less available, less reactive, more selective, faster, to leave slower, to trust your new baseline is scarcity. Because scarcity is what forces respect. This video does one psychological thing. It converts detachment from a vague mood into a repeatable doctrine. You stop needing space. You start controlling territory. And once you can control territory, exhaustion becomes impossible. Because exhaustion is what happens to men who keep their gates open and wonder why they're getting invaded. Your exhaustion survives for one reason. You still get paid for being accessible, not with money, with identity. You get to feel like the reliable one, the strong one, the man who handles it, the man people come to, the man who keeps the peace. That identity hit is your reward, so you keep volunteering for your own depletion. Machiavelli would call this the oldest trap in power, virtue as a leash. They praise your patience, so you keep tolerating. They call you good, so you keep complying. They label you mature, so you keep swallowing disrespect without consequence. And you confuse their labels for respect. They're not respecting you. They're assigning you a role that benefits them. So this is the execution. No slow change. No self-improvement fantasy. A clean identity death, because the needed man is the most controllable man in any room. The old identity, the useful servant, be honest about what you've been. You respond fast to prove you're not cold. You over-explain to prove you're not unfair. You keep showing up to prove you're not weak. You keep helping to prove you have value. That's not strength, that's auditioning. And men who audition for belonging get treated like background actors, replaceable, interchangeable, paid in crumbs. The reason you're tired of everything is because everything learned the same lesson. You can be accessed without cost. That lesson is your fault, not because you're evil, because you were trained to worship approval. So the first thing that dies is the approval reflex. Goodness is not a shield, it's a target. In power environments, good men are used as infrastructure. They become emotional trash bins, emergency responders, and free labor, because they fear being disliked more than they fear being drained. You replace good with sovereign. A sovereign does not prove his decency, he enforces his standards. He does not ask the room to understand him. He decides what the room is allowed to access. That's Machiavellian, not cruelty, control. The fixer believes, if I can solve it, I should. That belief turns you into a permanent repair shop. And repair shops don't sleep. Fixing is not virtue when it becomes automatic. It becomes a compulsion, an excuse to avoid your own mission by managing everyone else's chaos. So you install a new rule, not my problem unless it pays. Pays in alignment, pays in respect, pays in reciprocity, pays in outcomes. If it doesn't pay, it doesn't enter your mind. Loyalty is sacred only when it's earned. Most men practice blind loyalty. Loyalty to history, loyalty to people who drain them, loyalty to roles, loyalty to groups that only tolerate them when they're useful. Machiavellian selection replaces loyalty. Selection means, I evaluate behavior, I reward alignment, I remove access when standards are violated. I do not stay because of guilt, nostalgia, or fear. This is where weak men panic, because selection requires one terrifying skill, the ability to lose people. If you cannot lose people, you will be owned by them. Over-explaining is begging with extra words. It signals you're trying to be granted permission to protect yourself. That's upside-down power. A sovereign uses short sentences, policy sentences. Not doing that. Unavailable. No, then silence. Silence is the seal. It communicates, This is not a debate. Debates invite persuasion. Persuasion invites manipulation, not emotional coldness, strategic coldness. You become warm to what deserves warmth and indifferent to what doesn't. That's scarcity with intelligence. Your attention becomes earned, not assumed, priced, not free protected, not donated. You stop living as a public service. You start living as a private nation. And here's the psychological flip that completes the identity replacement. You stop measuring your worth by how needed you are and start measuring your worth by how hard you are to exploit. That's the Machiavellian standard. Not because you want to hurt people, because you refuse to be harvested. When this identity locks in, detachment stops feeling like distance. It becomes the most natural act in the world, the gate closing when someone tries to walk in without permission. Detachment is not disappearing. Detachment is command. Most men detach the way cowards retreat, quietly, emotionally, and with a hidden hope someone notices. That's not Machiavellian. That's a wounded animal crawling into a corner, waiting to be forgiven. And the world punishes that version of detachment. Hard, because weak detachment doesn't make you sovereign, it makes you irrelevant, a ghost, a rumor, a man who couldn't handle it. So here's the final warning. If you detach without structure, you lose status twice, first from being drained, then from being framed. You think you're escaping pressure. You're actually handing your enemies the script. They'll write it for you. He's unstable. He's selfish. He vanished because he can't face things. He's not built for responsibility. And if you return after that, apologetic, eager, over-explaining, you confirm their narrative and lock yourself into permanent lower rank. That's why detachment must be clean. Let's understand the difference between a king and a ghost. A ghost detaches because he's overwhelmed. He needs space. He sulks. He hides. He leaks signals. He watches from the shadows. He checks if they miss him. He returns too fast. A king detaches because of policy. He closes gates. He cuts supply lines. He moves his attention like currency. And most importantly, he does not beg for permission to protect his territory. Machiavellian detachment is not a mood. It's a regime change. That announcement is an invitation for negotiation, bait, guilt, and counterattack. You just warn the enemy you're repositioning. Strategists don't announce withdrawals. They execute them. Rage feels powerful. It isn't. Rage is leakage. Anger tells them exactly where to strike next, and it gives them the perfect excuse to paint you as unstable. In any social war, the calm aggressor wins the crowd. Detachment must be cold, not hot. Heat makes you controllable. Returning as the same accessible man is the worst one. You detach for a day, then you reappear with explanations, apologies, and overgiving to make up for it. That teaches everyone your detachment is a tantrum, not a boundary. And once they learn it's a tantrum, they apply pressure until you fold, every time. Expect a sequence. Humans are predictable under lost access. Bait, insults to hook your ego. Guilt, moral language to leash you. Sweetness, sudden warmth to reopen gates. Smear, controlling the room if they can't control you. None of it is personal. It's tactical. They are trying to restore the old supply chain. Your job is to do nothing, because nothing is the point. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is denied access. One reply out of weakness resets the entire game in their favor, so you detach and you hold. Here's the Machiavellian core. Detachment is not about comfort. It's about selection. Selection means you filter your world until only what respects your sovereignty remains. That requires one skill most men refuse to develop, the willingness to be disliked. Because the world will test you the moment you detach. It will call you cold. It will call you selfish. It will call you arrogant. Those labels are just heat-seeking missiles aimed at your old identity. If you still need approval, you'll run back. If you've killed that need, you'll keep walking. And that's when detachment becomes what it was always meant to be, a crown. Not because it looks noble, because it proves you can rule yourself when the crowd disapproves. If you want to stop being tired of everything, stop being available to everything. Today, execute one clean detachment. One conversation you don't enter, one request you don't explain, one person you stop feeding, one gate you close without guilt. No announcement, no drama, No confession. If you understand the assignment, write one word: sovereign.